Bavaria, West Germany. Spring, 1973. The farmhouse kitchen smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Afternoon light slanted through lace curtains, catching dust motes in golden shafts. Outside, apple trees stretched across rolling hills, their branches heavy with new blossoms. Martin Weber sat at the oak table his grandfather had built, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. 58 years old now. Gray at the temples, deep lines around his eyes that came from squinting into too many winters, seeing too many things no man should see. His grandchildren sat across from him. Anna, 7. Klaus, 5. Wide eyes full of innocent curiosity. Opa, Anna said, her voice soft. Were you in the war? Martin's hands tightened on the mug. The coffee had gone cold. He stared into it, seeing not his reflection but something else, something 3 decades old but fresh as yesterday's wound. Yes, Kleinum. I was. Did you fight the bad guys? Klaus asked. Martin looked at the boy. So young, so certain the world divided cleanly into heroes and villains. Right and wrong, light and dark. I fought, Martin said carefully. But war isn't like the stories you hear. There are no bad guys, no good guys. Just men, just boys, really, trying to survive, trying to do their duty. Were you scared? Martin closed his eyes. When he opened them, he wasn't in Bavaria anymore. He was 30 years younger, standing at the edge of a dying city, watching smoke rise from ruins that stretched to every horizon. Let me tell you about 9 days, he said quietly. 9 days that taught me what it means to be a man, what it costs to be a soldier, what we owe to those who never came home. The grandchildren leaned forward. Martin took a breath and stepped back into 1943. The city appeared through the morning haze like something from a nightmare. March 11th, 1943. We've been fighting outside Valoya for 3 days. Short, brutal engagements against Soviet units trying to break through toward Belgorod. Now they were pulling us out, sending us into Kharkov itself. 8 of us, my squad, detached to support the SS push into the city center. I was Unteroffizier Martin Weber, 28 years old. 3 years on the Eastern Front and still alive, which made me either lucky or cursed. I hadn't decided which. Kharkov wasn't a city anymore. It was ruins pretending to be a city. Block after block of devastation. Buildings reduced to shells. Facades standing with nothing behind them. Entire structures collapsed into mountains of rubble. The smell hit us a kilometer out. Cordite and burning wood and something sweet and rotten that made your throat close. Bodies, hundreds of them, buried in the rubble or left where they'd fallen. The cold preserved them enough to recognize as human, but not enough to stop the decay. Temperature hovered just above freezing. Cold that soaked through every layer you wore and settled into your bones. We'd been wet for days. Our uniforms never dried. The weight of them pulled at your shoulders with every step. We entered through the western suburbs just after dawn. Behind me, Otto Neumann was coughing, that dry, nervous cough he'd developed over the past week. 26 years old, school teacher before the war, taught 8-year-olds how to read poetry. Now he taught them nothing because he was here instead, coughing blood into his hand and trying to hide it from me. Heinrich Schroeder kept checking his MP40. Hands never still. 23 years old. Farm boy from Saxony. Good soldier once you got him focused. But the nerves ate at him. Made him check his weapon obsessively. Over and over. As if the mechanism might fail between one breath and the next. Franz Bachmann tried to light a cigarette. But his hands were shaking too much. 21. Studied literature before they drafted him. Could quote Rilke from memory. Now he couldn't light a cigarette without help. I struck a match for him. Cupped the flame against the wind. His eyes met mine briefly. Gratitude there. And something else. Fear. Maybe. Or recognition that we were walking into hell and might not walk out. Thanks, he said quietly. Ernst Hoffmann moved up beside me. My best observer. 30 years old. 3 years on the Eastern Front and still steady. Still competent. Still somehow human. He had a wife in Bavaria. 3 daughters. Greta. 7. Anna. 5. Baby Sophie. Barely 2. He carried their photograph wrapped in oilcloth in his breast pocket, pressed against his heart. Building ahead, he said, pointing. 3 stories. More intact than most. I looked where he indicated. Apartment block. Brick construction. The roof partially collapsed, but the walls stood. Ground floor windows were just dark holes leading into darkness. And in one of those holes, I saw movement. Subtle, just a shadow shifting, but enough. We have company, I said. Ernst nodded. His jaw tightened. We both understood what this meant. This sector was supposed to be cleared yesterday. The SS had pushed through, declared it secure. Moved on to the next objective. But in urban combat, cleared didn't mean empty. Buildings this size could hide entire squads in basements and subcellars. They'd let the first wave pass, then emerge to hit supply lines, cut off reinforcements, turn supposedly secure areas back into contested ground. Behind us, the rest of the squad spread out automatically, training and instinct taking over. Karl Steinberg, our youngest at 20, started humming softly, Bavarian folk song his mother had taught him. He did that when he was nervous, sang to keep the fear away. Blonde hair, blue eyes, recruitment poster face. Still believed we were doing something honorable here. Still believed in victory and homeland and all the words that sounded good but tasted like ash. Ludwig Brandt adjusted his MG42, checking the belt feed. 27. Quiet. Competent. Hadn't broken yet, but I could see the cracks forming. We all had them. Some just ran deeper than others. And Peter Richter brought up the rear. 24. Solid soldier. Good instincts. 8 of us total. 8 men walking into a city that had already swallowed thousands. We didn't know yet that by day's end, we'd be 7. The street ahead was choked with debris. Bricks and concrete chunks and twisted metal. Shattered glass crunched under our boots, no matter how carefully we moved. Shell craters every few meters. Some filled with frozen water. Others with things I didn't want to look at too closely. Distant artillery echoed between buildings. Sporadic rifle fire from blocks we couldn't see. The occasional chatter of machine guns. And underneath it all, a grinding, settling noise as damaged structures continued their slow collapse. Buildings dying. The city dying. We can't bypass it, I said to Ernst, keeping my voice low. If there are Soviets in there and we move past, they'll shoot us in the back the moment we're exposed. Agreed, Ernst said. We clear it now or die later. I gathered the squad behind a pile of rubble that had once been a corner shop. Kept my voice quiet. Sound carried strangely in these ruins. Sometimes a whisper traveled 50 meters. Other times you couldn't hear shouting from 10 meters away. The acoustics were broken along with everything else. 3-man entry team. I said, me, Heinrich, Franz. We go in through the front. Ernst, you take Karl and Ludwig. Circle around back. Hit them from the rear once we make contact. Otto and Peter stay outside. Provide security. Make sure nobody escapes or reinforces. Everyone nodded. No questions. We'd done this before. We checked weapons. Heinrich's MP40 was loaded. 32 rounds in the magazine. 2 spares in his pouches. Franz's Kar 98 had 5 rounds ready. Bayonet fixed. My own rifle was loaded, and I had my Luger P08 with 8 rounds of 9mm. Not enough ammunition if things went truly wrong. But if things went that wrong, no amount of ammunition would matter. On my signal, I said, we moved. Crossing that 20 meters of open street felt like crossing a mile of open ground under machine gun fire. Every step exposed. Every piece of rubble a potential obstacle that would trip you. Make noise. Give away your position. My eyes darted everywhere. Upper windows. Doorways. Piles of debris that could hide firing positions. The destroyed buildings seemed to watch us with their empty window eyes. Buildings that had seen too much killing, absorbed too much blood. The entrance wasn't a door anymore. Just a ragged hole in the wall where a door and most of the frame had been. Darkness beyond. Complete darkness. No light penetrating from inside. I went in first. Had to. I was the Unteroffizier. Leadership meant being first through fatal funnels. Meant being the one who caught the first burst of fire if someone was waiting in ambush. The smell inside was concentrated hell. Plaster dust thick enough to choke on. Burned wood and melted insulation. Something chemical and sharp that made my eyes water. And that rot smell again. Stronger here. Unavoidable. Something dead inside. Maybe multiple somethings. My eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. The entry hall was buried under fallen ceiling. Chunks of plaster and concrete the size of my torso scattered everywhere. A staircase started at ground level, disappeared where the landing had collapsed, then reappeared 2 meters higher up, as if reality had broken along with the structure. Everything creaked. The building was settling, dying slowly. Every small movement made it groan. Beams shifting under loads they were never designed to bear. Floors sagging above us. Walls cracking further with each passing minute. The whole structure felt alive in a horrible way, like a wounded animal waiting to collapse and take us with it. We moved deeper. Every sound we made echoed and amplified. The scrape of a boot on concrete. The clink of equipment. The rustle of cloth. My breathing seemed impossibly loud in my own ears. Behind me, Heinrich's breathing was fast and shallow. Franz's weapon rattled slightly as his hands shook. Movement ahead. A doorway to what looked like it had been a common room. The door hung off one hinge. Beyond it, I could see furniture overturned, a table on its side, broken chairs, and in the corner, partially hidden by fallen masonry, a shape that was too regular to be rubble. A man, Soviet soldier, facing away from us. Rifle pointed towards the back of the building where Ernst's team would be approaching. Young, couldn't have been more than 20. Thin, gaunt face visible in profile. Uniform too large for him, hanging off a frame that spoke of weeks or months of inadequate rations. He hadn't heard us yet. The building's constant groaning masked the sound of our movement. But any second now, he'd shift position. Turn around. See us standing here. I had maybe 2 seconds to decide. Shoot him. Alert everyone in the building. Start a firefight in close quarters where ricochets killed as easily as aimed shots. Where the difference between friend and foe disappeared in muzzle flashes and smoke. Try to take him quietly. Risk him getting a shot off first. Risk him shouting a warning that brought his comrades running. Back out. Leave him there to ambush Ernst's team. To shoot them in the back as they approached unsuspecting. No good choices. Never any good choices in urban combat. My rifle came up slowly. Every movement felt impossibly loud. The leather sling creaking. My uniform rustling. My finger finding the trigger guard with a soft scrape. The Soviet's head was in profile. Mostly shadow. I could see one eye. The line of his jaw. The hollow of his cheek. He looked tired. Looked like he'd been tired for years. The rifle reached my shoulder. I sighted down the barrel the way they'd trained us. Front sight post centered in the rear sight notch. Both aligned on the target's center mass. Don't aim for the head. Too easy to miss. Center mass. Biggest target. Most likely to hit something vital. My finger tightened on the trigger. The metal was cold even through my glove. The trigger had maybe 2 kilograms of pull. Halfway there. 3/4. The Soviet turned. His eyes went wide. Recognition and terror simultaneous. His mouth opened to form a word. A shout. A warning. His rifle began to swing toward us. Moving too slow. Far too slow. But moving. I fired. The shot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. My ears immediately started ringing. A high-pitched whine that would last for hours. Maybe days. The Soviet went backward like he'd been punched. Hit the wall behind him. Slid down it, leaving a dark smear. His rifle clattered on the rubble. His hands went to his chest, pressing against the wound. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Or maybe sound came out, but I couldn't hear it through the ringing in my ears. His eyes found mine, held them for a moment that stretched into eternity. They looked like my brother's eyes. Same color, same shape, same expression I'd seen when my brother was sick with fever. Lying in bed, looking up at me with confusion and fear. This boy wasn't my enemy. He was just a boy. Someone's son, someone's brother, and I just killed him. Everything happened at once, shouting from upstairs. Multiple voices, Russian, urgent, and confused. Running feet, heavy boots on damaged floors, bamfed floors that groaned under the sudden movement. Something fell, crashed, the sound of more structural damage, and from the back of the building, gunfire. Ernst's team engaging. The harsh chatter of a PPSH submachine gun answered by the slower, heavier crack of Kar-98s. Heinrich was already moving, MP-40 sweeping the ceiling, tracking the sounds of movement above us. I worked my rifle's bolt. The motion smooth and automatic from 3 years of practice. Ejected the spent casing. Chambered a fresh round. The mechanical action was almost comforting. Something predictable in chaos. Franz had dropped to one knee behind an overturned bureau, using it as cover. His rifle trained on the stairwell. A Soviet appeared at the top of the broken staircase, silhouette against gray light coming through a hole in the wall behind him. Just a dark shape. No details visible, but holding a rifle. That was enough. That was all you needed to know. Heinrich fired a burst. 5, maybe 6 rounds. The MP-40's rate of fire was around 500 rounds per minute, so that burst lasted just over half a second. But in that half second, the Soviet was hit multiple times. I saw impacts, dark spots appearing on his uniform. Saw him jerk and twist. He fell, tumbled down what remained of the stairs, landed in a heap at the bottom among the rubble. His rifle clattered down after him. He didn't move again. More shooting from upstairs. From the back of the building, a grenade detonated. The blast transmitted through the structure, made dust fall from the ceiling, made the whole building shudder like a living thing in pain. Someone screamed. High. Horrible. The scream of someone who knew they were dying and couldn't stop it. The scream cut off suddenly. The building was secure 15 minutes later. 6 Soviets dead total. 2 prisoners taken, hands bound, sent back for interrogation by the SL. We'd lost no one. Not yet. But the day was young. We gathered in what had been a second-floor apartment. Someone's home one. Now just wreckage. Furniture smashed. Belongings scattered. A child's toy lying in the corner. A wooden horse. Hand-carved. One leg broken off. I didn't look at it long. Couldn't afford to think about children. About families. About what this building had been before it became a battlefield. Otto was coughing again. Worse now. He leaned against a wall, hacking into his hand. When he pulled it away, there was blood on his palm. You need a medic. I said, I'm fine, he said, wiping his hand on his uniform. Just the cold. The dust. It wasn't just the cold and dust. We knew it. But what were we going to do? Send him back. We needed every man. Franz was still pale from the fighting. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, rifle across his knees, staring at nothing. First time. Ernst asked him gently. Franz nodded. Didn't speak. The first one stays with you, Ernst said. I still remember mine. Stalingrad. 2 years ago. I can still see his face when I close my eyes. Does it get easier? Franz asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ernst looked at him for a long moment. No, he said finally, but you learn to carry it. Learn to do what needs doing despite it. Karl came over, sat down beside Franz, put an arm around his shoulders. We're going to be okay, Karl said. His voice was bright, optimistic. We stick together. We'll get through this. All of us. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that optimism meant something here. That positive thinking could stop bullets or turn back artillery. But I'd been on the Eastern Front for 3 years. I'd seen too much. Good men died beside bad men. Brave men died beside cowards. The war didn't care about character or courage or who deserved to live. The war just took and took and took. But I didn't say any of that to Karl. Let him have his optimism while he could. He'd lose it soon enough. Get some rest. I told the squad. We move in 20 minutes. They settled in. Heinrich cleaned his MP40 with careful attention. Ludwig checked his MG42's belt feed. Otto tried to suppress his coughing and mostly failed. Ernst moved over to me, kept his voice low. We're going to lose men, he said quietly. You know that? I know, I said. Karl's too green. Otto's sick. Franz is breaking. I know, I said again. If it comes down to it, Ernst said, meeting my eyes. If we have to make choices, we don't leave anyone, I said firmly. We all go home or none of us do. Ernst looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Okay, he said. Just wanted to know where you stood. I stand with my men. I said, always at noon. He smiled slightly. That's why they follow you. 20 minutes later, we were moving again. Orders had come through an SS runner. Young, energetic, eyes bright with the adrenaline of combat. We were to advance 3 more blocks northeast. Link up with Kampfgruppe Hansen. Support their push toward the factory district. The schoolhouse rendezvous we'd been told about was forgotten. Plans changed faster than you could execute them in urban combat. Flexibility and aggression mattered more than careful coordination. We moved through streets that barely existed, following what had been boulevards, now just paths through rubble. Buildings on both sides reduced to facades and heaps of bricks. The deeper we went into the city, the worse the damage became. The outskirts had been fought over for days. The center had been fought over for weeks. Every building bore the marks of tank rounds, artillery, satchel charges, flamethrowers, and everywhere, the bodies, German and Soviet both. You couldn't tell sometimes. Uniforms so covered in dust and blood that identification was impossible. Just shapes lying in the rubble, frozen in the positions they died. Some looked peaceful. Most didn't. We didn't stop to check them. Couldn't. The bodies were part of the terrain now. Obstacles to move around or over. You stopped seeing them as people after a while. Had to stop seeing them as people. Had to make them objects. Things, terrain features. Otherwise, you couldn't function. Couldn't keep moving. Couldn't do what needed doing. A mortar round shrieked overhead. We hit the ground instinctively. The round impacted 2 blocks away. The explosion echoed between ruined buildings. When the debris stopped falling, we got up and kept moving. That's when it happened. We were crossing an intersection. Wide open space. No cover. You move fast through places like that. Didn't linger. Didn't give snipers time to line up shots. Peter was bringing up the rear. Last man in the column. The mortar round came without warning. No shriek. No time to react. Just the sudden roar of impact. The explosion was 50 meters behind us. Far enough it shouldn't have mattered. But shrapnel doesn't care about distance. Doesn't care about should or shouldn't. I turned at the sound, saw Peter on his back, saw the dark stains spreading across his chest, saw his mouth open and close. No sound coming out. Ernst was already running toward him. I followed. We reached him together, knelt in the rubble beside him. The shrapnel had punched through his chest. Right side. Lung messy. Probably. Maybe heart. Blood bubbling from his mouth with each breath. Pink foam. That meant lung for certain. His eyes found mine. Confused. Like he didn't understand what had happened. Like he thought there must be some mistake. Hold on, I said, reaching for my field dressing. We've got you. But we didn't have him. The wound was too bad. Too much blood. No way to stop it. No way to fix it here in the rubble of a dying city with nothing but bandages and hope. Ernst's hands were on the wound, pressing, trying to stop the bleeding. But the blood just kept coming, soaking through his gloves, spreading in a pool beneath Peter. Peter's hand found my arm. Gripped it? His grip was strong, then weaker, then barely there at all. His eyes stayed on mine, stayed there until they weren't seeing anything anymore. It took maybe 2 minutes, start to finish. 2 minutes to go from alive to dead, from a man to a thing lying in rubble. Ernst sat back. His hands were covered in blood. He stared at them, then at Peter's body. I couldn't stop it, he said quietly. I know, I said. The others had gathered around, stood in a circle, looking down at what had been Peter Richter, 24 years old, from somewhere in Prussia. I didn't even know what town. Had never asked. Karl was crying silently, tears running down his face. But no sound, just tears. Franz had his eyes closed, lips moving. Prayer, maybe, or poetry, or just words to fill the silence. Heinrich stared at the body, his hands clenched and unclenched on his MP40, the nervous energy finding no outlet. Otto coughed, blood on his lips, looking at Peter's corpse like he was seeing his own future. Ludwig's face was blank, empty, the 1,000-yard stare settling in. We need to move, Ernst said finally. Can't stay exposed like this. We can't just leave him, Karl said, voice breaking. We have to, I said. We'll mark the location. Recovery teams will collect him. That's all he gets, Karl said. We just leave him in the street like garbage. That's all any of us get. I said, not unkindly, just honest. This is war. This is how it ends. We marked the location, hung Peter's identification tag on a piece of rebar sticking from the rubble. German recovery teams would find it eventually, send his body home, or put him in a military cemetery. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe he'd lie there forever. Just another body in a city full of bodies. We moved on. 7 now. 7 of us left. The factory district loomed ahead. Massive structures, 5 and 6 stories tall. Reinforced concrete construction. Built to withstand Ukrainian winters and industrial accidents. They'd withstood the artillery surprisingly well. The Soviets had turned them into fortresses. We linked up with Kampfgruppe Hansen at 1500 hours. They were down to maybe 60% strength. Casualties from 3 days of continuous combat. Their Hauptmann looked like he'd aged a decade in those 3 days. Gray-faced, sunken eyes, hands that shook when he lit his cigarette. He briefed me quickly. Factory complex ahead. Multiple buildings connected by walkways and tunnels. Soviet strongpoint. Machine guns. Snipers. Mortars. They needed infantry support to clear it. Building by building. Floor by floor. Room by room. We were that support. The assault started at 1600 hours. Artillery preparation first. Every gun in range firing on the factory complex. The barrage lasted 10 minutes. Continuous thunder. The ground shaking. Buildings that were already damaged collapsing further. Smoke and dust filled the air. Turned afternoon into twilight. When it lifted, the SS went in first. Always the SS going first. Taking the initial casualties. Breaking the defenses. Panzer Grenadiers moving fast. Dismounting from their half-tracks. Spreading out with that professional precision. We followed 2 minutes behind. Moving through the gaps they created. The first building was a machine shop. Enormous. 30 meters wide. 80 long. Ceiling 4 meters high in places. Lathes. Drill presses. Milling machines. All damaged or destroyed. Overhead cranes hanging at crazy angles. Windows blown out along both walls. And Soviets, on multiple levels, firing down at anyone who entered. The SS had taken heavy casualties getting inside. We could see their dead lying near the entrance. 5 men cut down in the first rush. The survivors were pinned behind machines, trading fire with positions of. We came in from the south side, a different entrance. Tried to flank the Soviet positions. 50 meters in, a shot rang out. Single rifle shot from above. The round hit a drill press 5 meters ahead, sparked off metal, whined away. Everyone dropped, sought cover. I couldn't see the shooter. The upper levels were shadow and steel. Could have been anywhere. Covering fire. I shouted. Heinrich opened up with his MP, spraying the upper level. Franz added rifle shots. Ludwig brought his MG-42 to bear. The weapon roaring, 200 rounds per minute of suppressive fire. In the chaos, Karl tried to sprint to better position behind a lathe. He made it 3 meters. The rifle cracked again. The sound almost lost in the MG-42's fire. But I saw Karl jerk, saw him spin, saw him go down. I was moving before I thought about it. Running low, reaching him in seconds that felt like hours. He was on his back, clutching his leg. The round had hit him mid-thigh, shattered the bone. I could see the white of it through the torn uniform. Blood everywhere. His face was white, eyes wide with shock and pain. "Mama," he said. Not loud, just a whisper. "Mama." I dragged him behind the lathe, got him into cover. Ernst was there a moment later. Otto right behind him. "How bad?" Ernst asked. I looked at the wound. The femur was broken. Jagged pieces. The femoral artery might be intact. Might not. Hard to tell with all the blood. "Bad," I said. We tried to treat it. Field dressing over the wound. Tourniquet above it. Morphine from my kit. But the leg was ruined. Even if we got him to a surgeon. Even if the artery wasn't cut. He'd probably lose the leg. And we weren't getting him to a surgeon. Not anytime soon. The fighting was still going on around us. Karl was still conscious. Still aware. He looked up at me with those young eyes. "Am I going to die?" he asked. I wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him he'd be fine. That we'd get him out. That he'd see his mother again. But he deserved the truth. "I don't know," I said. "But we're not leaving you. I promise you that." He nodded. Then his eyes closed. The morphine taking effect? Or shock? Or both? Otto stayed with him. Tried to keep pressure on the wound. Tried to keep him alive. The rest of us pushed forward. The fighting in the machine shop was chaos. Close quarters. Multiple levels. Soviets firing from positions we couldn't see. Return fire from SS and Wehrmacht. Grenades detonating. The air thick with smoke and dust and the smell of propellant. Then I heard it from the west side. The SS pushing up a stairwell. Using grenades to suppress defenders. Multiple blasts echoing. Amplified by the enclosed space. Shouting in German and Russian. The sustained chatter of submachine guns. They were advancing. If they could reach the upper floors, get behind the Soviets shooting at us, we could catch them in a crossfire. But they needed time. Needed the Soviets distracted. I grabbed a stick grenade from my belt. Unscrewed the base cap. Pulled the cord. The fuse ignited with the soft pop. 4.5 seconds. Standard German engineering. I counted 1, 2, stepped out from cover. Exposed myself for the throw. Above me, movement. Someone tracking me. A rifle cracked. The round missed. Close enough I felt the displacement. 3, I threw hard. Upward. The grenade arced through the air. Spinning. Disappeared into the shadows above. 4, I dropped back into cover. 5, the blast was massive. Sharp crack. Brilliant flash. Immediately followed by screaming. Someone had been close to it. Very close. Heinrich threw another grenade. Franz was firing steadily. The Soviet fire slackened. Not much, but enough. Enough to move. I pushed forward with the men I had left. We covered 20 meters in a running crouch. Threw ourselves behind machines near the center support columns. From here, I had better visibility of the upper floors. Catwalks, gantries, platforms, and shapes moving between them. At least 3 Soviets, maybe 4. I picked a target. Man-shaped shadow against slightly lighter background. Could see head and shoulders above a machine. Range maybe 30 meters. I braced my rifle against the support. Controlled my breathing. Squeezed. The rifle kicked. The target dropped. Hit or luck or both. Didn't matter. One less gun shooting at us. The fighting on the west stairwell was getting louder. The SS was pushing hard. I could hear German voices clearly now. Shouting orders. Coordinating. They were close. Very close. And then they came through. Burst onto the upper floor from the west. 4 or 5 men. Firing as they came. The Soviets were caught between us. Some tried to turn. Engage the new threat. Some tried to run. Some just froze. It was over in seconds. Brutal. Close range. Final. Silence fell. Relative silence. My ears rang so badly normal sounds seemed distant. I could see SS men on the upper level now. Standing among the bodies. Their uniforms soaked with blood. Probably not theirs, but covered in it. Faces splattered. We'd taken the machine shop. Kost, Karl, dying or dead behind a lathe. 2 SS men I could see lying motionless on the upper floor. Maybe more I couldn't see. But we had the building, which meant we could advance deeper into the complex, which meant more fighting. Always more fighting. I made my way back to where Otto knelt beside Karl. The boy's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. Not moving, not breathing. Otto looked up at me, his face wet with tears. I tried, he said. I tried to stop the bleeding. I know. I said, Karl Steinberg, 20 years old, youngest in our squad, believed we were doing something good here. Believed in victory and honor in all the words that died with him in the rubble. I knelt beside his body, closed his eyes with my hand. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry. Kid. Behind me, the others gathered. Ernst, Heinrich, Franz, Ludwig, Otto. 6 of us now. 6 of 8. Peter gone. Karl gone. And we'd only been in Kharkov for 6 hours. We held the machine shop overnight, set up defensive positions, posted guards, tried to sleep in shifts. Sleep was impossible. The cold was brutal once you stopped moving. No heat in the building, no way to make fire without drawing attention. So we just sat there in our wet uniforms, shivering, waiting for dawn and whatever came next. The building groaned and settled constantly. Every sound made you reach for your weapon. Around midnight, Ernst moved over to where I sat against a concrete pillar. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me, pulled out the oilcloth packet from his breast pocket, unfolded it carefully. The photograph inside, his 3 daughters, Greta, 7, Anna, 5, baby Sophie. This is why, he said quietly, this is why I keep going. Why I'll keep going until I can't anymore. I looked at the photo, 3 little girls, smiling, innocent, safe in Bavaria while their father sat in hell. They're beautiful. I said, they are, Ernst said. He refolded the cloth carefully, put it back against his heart. Greta asks about me in every letter, wants to know when I'm coming home. I don't know what to tell her. Tell her soon. I said, tell her you're trying. I am trying, Ernst said. Every day I wake up is a day closer to seeing them again. That's what I tell myself. We sat in silence for a while. Around us, the others tried to rest. Franz was writing something, a letter, maybe, his hand moving slowly across paper he'd scavenged from somewhere, writing by the light of a single candle stub. Heinrich had finally stopped checking his weapon, sat with his back against a wall, eyes open, staring at nothing. Ludwig cleaned his MG42 with mechanical precision. Strip it down, check every component, reassemble, strip it down again, over and over. The repetitive motion keeping something at bay. Otto coughed quietly. Blood on his hand again. He looked at it for a long moment, then wiped it on his already filthy uniform. We need to talk, Ernst said to me. Still quiet. Just between us. About what? About Otto. About Franz. About how much longer they can hold on. They'll hold, I said. Will they? Ernst asked. Franz vomited after the fighting. Didn't think anyone saw. But I saw, and Otto's coughing up blood. Whatever's wrong with him, it's getting worse. What do you want me to do? I asked. Send them back. We need every man. I know, Ernst said. I'm just saying, be prepared for when they can't anymore. I looked at him, steady, competent, 3 years on the Eastern Front and still human somehow. Still able to think, to plan, to care. How do you do it? I asked. How do you stay? You? He was quiet for a moment. I think about them, he said, touching his breast pocket. Every time I think I can't take another step, every time I think about just giving up, I remember those faces, and I take another step. That's all any of us can do. I said, take another step, and then another, until we can't, or until we're home, Ernst said. Or until we're home, I agreed. But I didn't believe it. Didn't believe we'd make it home. The odds were against us. The city was vast. The Soviets were fighting for every meter. And we were just 6 men. The number would keep dropping, keep falling, until there were none. But I didn't say that to Ernst. Let him have his hope. Let him have his daughters. Let him have something to fight for beyond duty and survival. Morning came cold and gray. No sunrise. Just darkness fading slowly to dim light filtered through smoke and dust. Orders came an hour after dawn. Clear the tunnels. The factory complex was riddled with them. Maintenance quarters, utility passages, bomb shelters that went down 3 levels. all connected, all dark. The Soviets were using them to move between buildings, to bypass positions on the surface, to appear and attack and disappear before we could respond. 2 Wehrmacht teams had gone down into those tunnels and never come back up. No radio contact. Radios didn't work down there. Too much concrete and steel. No survivors. No bodies recovered. Just gone. Swallowed by darkness. And now they were setting us down. I gathered my squad, looked at their faces. Ernst, steady as always. Heinrich, nervous but present. Franz, pale but determined. Ludwig, empty-eyed. Otto, coughing. We're going into the tunnels. I said, maintenance level under the administration building. Orders are to clear them. Systematically, no matter the cost. No one spoke. But I saw it in their faces. The fear, the knowledge of what waited below. Franz finally broke the silence. His voice was quiet. The other teams that went down, what happened to them? I don't know. I said honestly, but we're not them. We go in prepared. We go in together, and we come out together. Understood. They nodded, but the fear was still there. Otto spoke up. Unteroffizier. Permission to speak freely. Granted, I'm not going to make it out of this city, he said. Matter of fact, not self-pity, just recognition of reality. We all know it. My lungs are failing. The cold, the dust, whatever's wrong with me. Otto weren't started. Let me finish, he said. I'm not going to make it out, but I can still be useful, still do my duty. So I'm coming with you, into those tunnels. And whatever happens down there, at least it'll be quick. The others were quiet, looking at Otto. This school teacher who taught 8-year-olds poetry, who was now coughing blood and accepting his death with more grace than most men twice his age. We're all coming back, I said. All of us. That's an order. Otto smiled slightly. Yes, Unteroffizier. But we both knew it was a lie. We descended into the tunnels at 0500 hours. Before dawn, while the city was still dark, the entrance was a stairwell in the administration building. Heavy steel door, bent on its hinges, gap wide enough to see through into absolute darkness beyond. The smell from below was indescribable. Sewage from burst pipes, mold growing in perpetual damp, chemicals from broken industrial systems. And that rot smell again? Concentrated, unavoidable. Things dead down there. Multiple things. I went first through the door, part of being Unteroffizier, part of setting the example. The darkness beyond was complete. Our flashlights. We had 2 functioning flashlights between 6 men. Barely made a dent in it. The beams seemed to be absorbed rather than illuminating. The stairwell descended into a corridor. Concrete walls slick with moisture. Ceiling low enough that taller men had to duck. Water on the floor. Ankle deep. Freezing. Every step splashed. The sound echoing impossibly loud in the confined space. We moved in single file. No room for any other formation. Every man watching the man ahead. Following his movements. Trying not to think about what might be waiting in the darkness behind. The corridor branched after 20 meters. Left or right. No signs. No maps. No way to know which was better or worse or if it made any difference at all. I chose left. Had to choose something. Standing still in those tunnels felt like drowning in darkness. The passage narrowed. Walls closing in. Ceiling lowering further. Water getting deeper. Rising to mid-shin. Cold that bit through boots already soaked. Through socks already frozen. Into feet that had stopped having feeling days ago. You just kept moving. Because stopping meant freezing. Meant dying. We found the first body 30 meters in. German soldier. From one of the earlier clearing teams. Face down in the water. Dead at least 2 days. Judging by the state of him. Multiple gunshot wounds to the back. He'd been running away from something when they shot him. The something had been behind him. In the darkness, we all thought about that. About what was behind us right now. In the darkness we'd just passed through, the passage widened into a larger space. Some kind of utility room. Pumps that weren't pumping. Valves that weren't valving. Electrical panels rusted and dead. And more bodies. 4 Germans. 3 Soviets. All dead. All entangled together in positions suggesting close-range fighting. These men had killed each other in the dark. Maybe couldn't even see each other clearly. Just fired at sounds and shapes until they were all dead. Franz was sick. Right there in the utility room. Couldn't help it. The sight of the bodies. The smell. The horror of what had happened here. Ernst put a hand on his shoulder. Waited until he was done. Then helped him straighten up. First time seeing them this close. Ernst asked quietly. Franz nodded. Wiped his mouth with a shaking hand. It gets worse before it gets better. Ernst said, Not unkindly, just honest. But you can handle it. I've seen you. You're stronger than you think. Franz didn't look convinced. But he nodded, picked up his rifle, kept moving. Beyond that room, the passage split 3 ways. We couldn't split up. That was suicide in these conditions. But checking all 3 would take hours we didn't have. The longer we stayed down here, the worse our odds of getting back up. I was about to pick the middle passage when Heinrich grabbed my arm, held up his hand for silence. We all froze, and then I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Voices, speaking Russian, multiple speakers, maybe 3, maybe 4. They weren't whispering, weren't trying to conceal themselves. Either they didn't know we were down here, or they thought the tunnels would protect them. Lights out, I whispered. We doused the flashlights. Darkness fell like a physical weight. Complete, absolute, makes you doubt your other senses. Makes you wonder if you're still standing or falling, still breathing or drowning. Your mind starts inventing things to fill the void. Shapes, movement, presences that aren't there. We waited, listening. The only sound was water dripping, and our own breathing. The voices grew louder, boots splashing, getting closer. 30 meters, 20 V. And then we saw light, weak, flickering, probably a candle or improvised lamp. It cast wild shadows on the tunnel walls. Behind the light, figures, shapes. I counted 3, maybe 4. Hard to tell with the shadows dancing. They were coming straight toward us, still talking, still not being quiet. They had no idea we were there. We were in complete darkness. They were silhouetted by their own light. Perfect tactical situation. Perfect ambush. They'd walk right into us. But firing would alert every Soviet in the tunnel system. Would start a firefight in pitch darkness, where you couldn't see friend or foe. Where ricochets off concrete walls killed as efficiently as aimed shots. Where the muzzle flash from your own weapon destroyed your night vision and made you blind. 5 meters. 4. The light swung toward us. Did they see something? Sense something? Or just random movement? 3 meters. I could see them now in the peripheral glow of their light. Soviet soldiers, young, thin, looking tired and cold, and very much not expecting to die in the next second. 2 meters. The lead figure's expression changed. Recognition dawning, eyes going wide, mouth opening to shout warning. I fired. The muzzle flash was blinding in absolute darkness. My night vision destroyed instantly. I was firing blind, worked the bolt by muscle memory. Fired again. Around me. The others opened fire. The tunnel became chaos. Muzzle flashes strobing like lightning. The sound deafening, compressed by concrete walls, amplified until it wasn't sound anymore, but physical force hitting your ears. Men screaming, splashing, something falling. It lasted maybe 5 seconds of real time. Felt like forever. When the shooting stopped, the silence was almost worse. My ears rang so badly I couldn't hear anything below that high-pitched whine. Couldn't see anything either. The darkness was complete again. Their light extinguished. Our muzzle flashes faded. Someone turned on a flashlight. The beam swept the corridor. Bodies in the water. 4 Soviets down. One was still moving weakly, making wet, gurgling sounds. Otto moved forward without hesitation. Put his bayonet through the man's throat. The sound stopped. The moving stopped. Just one more body in the water. We stood there for a moment. 6 men in a flooded tunnel beneath a dying city, surrounded by corpses, knowing that the gunfire would have been heard throughout the tunnel system, knowing that every Soviet down here now knew where we were, would be moving to engage us, or to flee, or to set up ambushes in the darkness ahead. We had to move. Fast. Forward. I said, double time. We find stairs up or we die down here. And we moved. Into the darkness. Into whatever waited. Because that's what soldiers do. That's what duty means. You take another step. And then another. Until you can't. Or until you're home. The next hour in those tunnels was sustained nightmare. We pushed deeper into the labyrinth. The flashlight beams swept ahead, revealing passages that branched and twisted. Some narrowed until we had to move single file, shoulders scraping concrete. Others opened into chambers that echoed with sounds we couldn't identify. Water everywhere, sometimes ankle deep, sometimes to our knees. Cold that had stopped being painful. Now it was just numbness, a void where sensation used to be. We found more passages, more rooms, more bodies. A Soviet soldier wedged in a narrow crawl space, dead from what looked like a grenade blast. A German corporal slumped against a wall, rifle still in his hands, frozen in the act of reloading. Every corpse told a story. Every story ended the same way. We encountered another Soviet patrol 30 minutes in. The engagement was sudden, violent, no warning. They came around a corner. We came around the same corner from the opposite direction. For a split second, both sides froze. Men staring at men across maybe 3 meters of darkness. Then everyone fired at once. The tunnel became strobing chaos again. Muzzle flashes, deafening reports, screaming, the smell of propellant thick enough to choke on. Franz's rifle cracked. Heinrich's MP40 roared. Ernst fired controlled bursts. Ludwig's MG42 couldn't traverse in the narrow space, but he worked the trigger anyway. The belt fed through. Tracers ricocheting off walls in wild patterns. I saw shapes falling. Saw dark sprays against concrete. Couldn't tell if they were ours or theirs. The fight lasted maybe 10 seconds. When it stopped, 3 Soviets were down, not moving. We'd taken casualties too. A replacement. I never learned his name. He'd only been with us since yesterday. Lay on his back in the water. PPSH rounds had stitched across his chest. 7, maybe 8 hits. He was dead before his body settled. Otto knelt beside him anyway. Checked for pulse. Found none. Closed the boy's eyes. 19, Otto said quietly, looking at the dead replacement's face. Maybe 20, just a kid. They're all kids, Ernst said. On both sides. We couldn't carry the body. Couldn't even mark it properly. The tunnels would claim him like they'd claimed the others. We kept moving. The passages seemed endless. Turning, branching, descending deeper. We were lost, completely disoriented. No compass worked down here. The metal in the walls played havoc with the needles. We followed the principle of always bearing right, hoping it would eventually lead us in a circle, hoping we'd find stairs up before we ran out of ammunition or sanity. Heinrich was starting to crack. I could see it, hear it in his breathing, fast and shallow, hyperventilating. I can't, he said suddenly, stopping in the middle of a corridor. I can't do this anymore. The water was knee-deep here, flowing, coming from somewhere, going somewhere. We stood in it, freezing, exhausted. You can, Ernst said, turning to face him. You are doing it. You're here. You're still moving. We're going to die down here. Heinrich said, his voice rising, just like the others. They'll find our bodies in a week. A month, just more corpses in the dark. Maybe, Ernst said, but not today. Not here. Not while we can still fight. What's the point? Heinrich said. What's the point of fighting? Of any of this? Franz moved closer, put his hand on Heinrich's shoulder. The point, Franz said quietly, is each other. That's the only point there is. He recited then, Rilke, from memory, his voice steady in the darkness. In this uncontainable night, be the power at the center of your might. Be the evening that grows richer and richer. Be the meaning that takes meaning from fright. Heinrich stared at him, water dripping from his helmet, face pale in the flashlight beam. Poetry, he said. You're quoting poetry. Otto taught me that one, Franz said. Before we came down here, he said it helped his students when they were scared. When the bombing started, when their fathers didn't come home, Otto's students were 8 years old. Heinrich said, we're all 8 years old down here. Franz said, scared. Lost? Looking for something to hold on to. He kept his hand on Heinrich's shoulder. The contact grounding, human. We go forward together, Ernst said, stepping closer, or we die alone. Your choice. But I'm going forward. Martin's going forward. Franz is going forward. Ludwig and Otto are going forward. So the question is, are you coming with us? Heinrich looked at each of us in turn. His breathing was still fast, his hands still shaking, but something steadied in his eyes. Together, he said. Together, Ernst confirmed. All right, Heinrich said. All right? I'm sorry. I just don't apologize. I said, we're all scared. Anyone who says they're not is lying. We linked arms then, all 6 of us, standing in a flooded tunnel beneath a dying city, arms over shoulders, creating a physical connection, a reminder. We weren't machines. We weren't numbers. We weren't expendable components in some vast engine of war. We were brothers, and brothers don't leave each other behind. Let's go home, Ernst said. Let's go home. We echoed, and we moved forward into the dark. We found more passages 20 minutes later. The tunnel split again, this time into 4 directions, water flowing faster here, the sound of it rushing somewhere below, somewhere deeper. I was about to choose when Otto grabbed my arm, his grip weak, shaking. Martin, he said, his voice barely audible. I can't breathe. I turned, shined the flashlight on his face. He was gray, lips blue, each breath a wet, rattling struggle, blood running from his mouth. More than before. Much more. We need to get you out. I said, now. No, he said, coughing. More blood. No, I'm done. I can feel it. My lungs they're drowning. From the inside. Otto, listen, he said. Urgent now, using what little strength he had left. You need to keep going. Find the stairs. Get out. I'll slow you down. We don't leave anyone. I said, that's the rule. Otto smiled. Sad? Peaceful. Sometimes the rule has to break. For the others to survive. Ernst came over, looked at Otto, saw what I saw. A man dying on his feet. Maybe minutes left. Maybe less. We can carry you, Ernst said. You can't, Otto said. Not through these tunnels. Not with Soviets still hunting us. I'll hold here. Buy you time if they come. Otto. No, Franz started. Please, Otto said, looking at each of us. Let me do this. Let me mean something. At the end, we stood in silence. Water rushing. Darkness pressing in. Knowing he was right. Knowing that carrying him would slow us down. Would get us all killed. Knowing that sometimes brotherhood means letting go. Tell my wife, Otto said, voice getting weaker. Tell her. I thought of my students. At the end, tell her. Poetry survived. Even here. Even in hell. Poetry survived. I'll tell her. I said. I promise. Otto nodded. Slid down against the tunnel wall. Sat in the water. Rifle across his lap. He looked at us. Smiled. Go, he said. Before I changed my mind. We hesitated. Every instinct screaming not to leave him. Not to abandon a brother. But he was right. He was already dead. We were just waiting for his body to catch up with the inevitable. Thank you, I said, for being our brother. For teaching us what courage looks like. The honor was mine. Otto said. We moved on. Left him there. Sitting in the dark. In the water. Waiting for death. Or for Soviets. Whichever came first. Behind us. We heard him start to recite poetry. Rilke. Probably. His voice echoing in the tunnels. Growing fainter as we moved away. Then a coughing fit. Then silence. Then gunfire. Sharp cracks. PPSH bursts. Otto's rifle answering. Slower. Steady. Then just the PPSA. Then nothing. We didn't stop. Couldn't stop. We kept moving. 5 of us now. Carrying Otto with us. Forever. We found stairs 10 minutes later. Not the stairs we'd come down. Different ones. Leading up into a different building. The power station at the eastern edge of the complex. Daylight filtered down from above. Gray and weak, but daylight nonetheless. We climbed slowly, our legs barely working after hours in freezing water. Our gear heavy with accumulated water and mud. We emerged into chaos. The upper floors of the power station were being contested. Heavy fighting. Explosions. The sustained chatter of automatic weapons. An SS unit was clearing the building room by room. We could hear them shouting coordinates. Calling out targets. The professional violence of experienced urban fighters. We stumbled into their perimeter. 5 men covered in filth and blood and tunnel water. Eyes hollow. Moving like ghosts. An SS Sturmbannführer took one look at us and immediately redirected us to a reserve position. You're done, he said. Not unkindly. Get some rest. Hot rations if you can find them. You've earned it. We didn't argue. Couldn't have argued if we wanted to. We followed his directions to a warehouse 2 blocks back. Relatively intact. Mostly dry. Other Wehrmacht soldiers there. Resting. Eating. Writing letters. We collapsed. Simply collapsed where we stood. Dropping our weapons. Slumping against walls or onto the floor. For a long time, nobody spoke. We just breathed. Just existed. Just processed the fact that we were still alive. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. Had been shaking for hours probably. But only now did I notice Ludwig was sitting against a wall, staring at nothing. His hands were steady now. Too steady. The tremor gone. The life gone. Whatever had been human in his eyes before the tunnels, it was completely absent now. Heinrich sat with his knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. Not crying, not speaking, just existing in some space between shock and breakdown. Franz was writing again, moving almost automatically. Pen across paper. Words I couldn't see. Ernst came over, lowered himself down beside me. Moved like an old man. We were all moving like old men now, aged out decades and days. Otto, he said quietly. I know, I said. We left him there. He chose to stay. I said, bought us time, died protecting his brothers. In this world, in this war, that's as good as it gets. Ernst was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out his photograph, looked at it, put it back against his heart. I'm going to see them again, he said. Not a question, a declaration. I'm going to walk up to my house and knock on the door, and my wife will open it, and I'll hold my daughters, and I'll never let them go. You will, I said. I believe that. We rested for 18 hours. Actual rest. First time in days we weren't moving or fighting or waiting to die. They brought us hot rations, watery soup with bits of potato and mystery meat. But hot? The first hot food in nearly a week. We ate in silence, savoring every bite. Not because it tasted good. It didn't, but because it was warm. Because it meant we were still alive to eat it. During the off hours, Franz was writing. I saw him hunched over a piece of paper, pencil moving slowly. Carefully, I moved over, sat down beside him. Letter to Anna, I asked. He nodded. Didn't stop writing. I glanced at the page. Couldn't help it. My dearest Anna, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. Don't know if I'll live to send it, but I need to write it anyway. Need to put words to paper. Need to feel like I'm talking to you even if you never hear it. I'm learning things here. Terrible things. Beautiful things. Contradictory things that shouldn't exist in the same world. I'm learning what courage looks like. It looks like Otto staying in a tunnel to buy his brother's time, even though it meant his death. It looks like Ernst carrying photographs of his daughters into hell because they're his reason to survive. It looks like Heinrich admitting he's terrified but standing his ground anyway. I'm learning what brotherhood means. It means linking arms in darkness when you can't see the future. It means carrying each other when one man falls. It means becoming family with strangers because blood doesn't matter when you're bleeding together. I don't know who I'll be when I come home. If I come home, the boy you knew is gone, changed, replaced by someone harder, someone who's seen too much. But I hope that somewhere inside, enough of him survived, enough poetry, enough beauty, enough capacity for love, because I love you. That hasn't changed, won't change, even if everything else does. Yours, always. Franz. He finished writing, folded the paper carefully, tucked it into his breast pocket. You're not going to send it, I asked. Not yet, he said. Maybe not ever. But writing it helps. Makes me feel connected to something beyond this. Ernst overheard, came over carrying his own writing materials. I write to my daughters every night, he said, whether I send the letters or not. Tell them about Bavaria, about the farm, about the apple trees and the mountains and the life we'll have when I get home. What do you tell them about the war? Franz asked. Nothing, Ernst said. They're 7 and 5 and 2. They don't need to know about war, about death, about what their father has to do to come home to them. He pulled out his photograph, looked at it for a long moment. Greta asks about me in every letter, he said softly. My wife reads them to me when mail comes through. When is Papa coming home? That's what she asks. Every time. What do you tell her? Franz asked. Soon, Ernst said. I tell her soon. I tell her Papa is trying very hard to come home. That Papa loves her and thinks about her every day. We sat together in silence. 3 soldiers writing letters to people who might never receive them. Holding on to fragments of the lives we'd left behind. The lives we hoped to return to. If we survived. Ludwig joined us, sat down heavily. He'd been cleaning his MG42 again. The weapon gleamed, every part oiled, every component checked. But his hands were shaking now. Fine tremor he couldn't control. I can't stop seeing them, Ludwig said abruptly. The bodies in the tunnels, the way they looked, the way they smelled. None of us can, I said. No, Ludwig said. You don't understand. I see them when I'm awake, when I sleep, when I close my eyes for even a second. They're there, floating in the water, staring at me. He held up his hands, looked at them like they belonged to someone else. These hands have killed, he said. I don't even know how many. Stopped counting after the first day. But dozens, maybe more. Men who had families, lives, futures. They would have killed you, Ernst said gently. Would have killed all of us. I know, Ludwig said. I know that logically, intellectually, but my hands don't know. My dreams don't know. They just know they've taken life. Again and again, and again and again. Over the next 2 days, The combat shifted elsewhere. The SS was pushing toward the city center now. Leaving Wehrmacht units to secure what they'd taken, we set up in a partially collapsed apartment building overlooking a key intersection. Good fields of fire. Solid cover. Relatively dry. The work was monotonous. Watch rotations. Checking sightlines. Improving fighting positions. But monotony was welcome. Monotony meant nobody was trying to kill us. At least not actively. Ludwig's condition worsened on the second day. Nothing dramatic. Just a low-grade fever. A degree or two above normal. But his shrapnel wound from the tunnels, a gash across his shoulder he'd said was fine, was red. Inflamed. The skin around it hot to the touch. Infection. Let me see it, Ernst said. Ludwig reluctantly removed his uniform jacket, unwrapped the bandage he'd applied himself. The wound looked bad. Angry red streaks radiating outward. Pus seeping from the edges. The flesh around it swollen and discolored. That needs proper treatment, Ernst said. A surgeon? Antibiotics? We don't have either, Ludwig said. He rewrapped it, put his jacket back on. So I'll manage. Ludwig. I said I'll manage. Ludwig snapped. I'm not leaving my squad. Not abandoning my brothers. I'll be fine. But he wasn't fine. Over the next 24 hours, the fever climbed. His eyes became glassy, unfocused. He started shivering despite being wrapped in every blanket we could scrounge. By the morning of the 16th, he was delirious. He sat against a wall, mumbling to himself, talking to people who weren't there. Class, he said. Class, please settle down. We need to finish the lesson. Ludwig, I said, crouching beside him. There's no class. You're in Kharkov. You're with your squad. His eyes focused on me for a moment. Confused. Martin, he said, what are you doing in my classroom? You're not in a classroom, I said gently. You're sick. You have a fever. You need to rest. No, he said. No, I have to finish the lesson. The students need to learn their multiplication tables. If they don't, he trailed off, eyes going distant again. Margaret, he said. His wife's name, Margaret. I'm sorry I'm late. The traffic was terrible. The roads are all blocked. Rubble everywhere. But I'm coming home. I promise. Just wait for me. Please wait. He reached out, hands grasping at air, trying to hold someone who wasn't there. Franz sat down on Ludwig's other side, took his hand. She's waiting, Franz said softly. Margaret is waiting for you. At home, she'll wait as long as it takes. Ludwig smiled, the fever-bright smile of someone slipping away. That's good, he said. That's good. She's always been patient. So patient with me. He coughed, blood on his lips, not from his lungs. From biting his tongue during fever chills, Ernst checked his wound again. The infection had spread, red streaks running up his arm now, tracking toward his heart. We need to get him to an aid station, Ernst said. Now, before it's too late. We tried to move him, tried to get him to his feet, but he was too weak, too far gone. His legs wouldn't support him. I'll carry him, Ernst said, starting to lift Ludwig over his shoulder. No, I said, stopping him. Look at him. Ernst, really look. Ernst looked and saw what I saw. Ludwig was dying. The infection was in his blood now, racing through his system, shutting down organs one by one. Even if we got him to an aid station, and that was a big if, they wouldn't be able to save him. Not without antibiotics. Not without proper surgery. We can't just leave him to die, Ernst said. We're not leaving him, I said. We're staying with him. Until the end. That's all we can do. Ernst's jaw tightened. But he nodded, gently lowered Ludwig back down. We stayed with him through the day, taking turns holding his hand, talking to him when he was lucid enough to hear, letting him ramble when he wasn't. He talked about his classroom, his students, his wife, his life before the war. That life seemed impossibly distant now, like something from a story, a fairy tale about a world that might never have existed. As evening fell, Ludwig's breathing changed, became irregular, ragged. We all recognized it. The death rattle. His eyes opened, focused for a moment, saw us gathered around him. My brothers, he whispered. My squad, always. I said. He smiled. Then his eyes closed. His breathing slowed, became shallower. We sat with him, silent, bearing witness. And 20 minutes later, Ludwig Brandt stopped breathing entirely. No dramatic death, no final words, just a man slipping away, surrounded by the only family that mattered. We sat in silence for a long time after. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Another brother gone. Another chair empty at a table that kept getting smaller. He deserved better, Heinrich said finally, voice rough. We all deserve better. Franz said. Better doesn't matter. Ernst said. Only what is, and what is, Ludwig died with his brothers beside him. In this world, in this war, that's as good as it gets. We buried him that night, or as close to burial as we could manage. Wrapped his body in a shelter laid him in a shell crater, covered him with rubble and debris. I said words over him, not a prayer exactly. I wasn't sure I believed in God anymore, but words felt necessary. Acknowledgement that a life had ended, that it had mattered. Ludwig Brandt, I said, teacher, soldier, brother. He did his duty. He protected his squad. He died among men who loved him. May his students remember him. May his wife remember him. May we carry him forward. May we carry him forward. The others echoed. When it was done, we returned to our position. 4 of us now, 4 of the original 8. Peter, Karl, Otto, Ludwig, all gone. And the fighting wasn't even close to finished. Orders came on the 17th as the sun was setting. Runners from division headquarters. New offensive launching tomorrow. Final push for the city center. Dzerzhinsky Square. Everyone was going in. Every unit. Every available man. This was it. The decisive battle. Win or die. We received the orders in silence. Already knowing what they meant. Heavy casualties. Brutal fighting. The Soviets would make their stand there. Their final defense. And we'd have to break it. Or die trying. Prepare to move at 0600, the runner said. Artillery barrage at 0530. SS goes in first. Wehrmacht supports. Standard assault doctrine. He left. Moved on to the next unit. Delivering the same orders to other squads. Other doomed men. We sat together. 4 of us. Looking at each other. Knowing this might be our last night. Well, Heinrich said, at least it'll be over soon. One way or another. What else is there to say? He continued. We all know what tomorrow means. We all know the odds. The odds don't matter, Franz said. What matters is that we face it together. Together, I said. We spent our last night together. Talking, sharing stories, trying to remember what life had been like before the war. Ernst talked about his farm in Bavaria. The apple orchards, the way the mountains looked at sunset, the sound of his daughters laughing. Franz recited poetry. Rilke mostly, but also Goethe. Heine. Words about love and loss and the human condition. Heinrich talked about his village in Saxony. The harvest festivals, the beer gardens, the simple life he'd left behind and hoped to return to. And I talked about my brother, younger by 3 years, killed in France in 1940, one of the first casualties of the war. I think about him every day. I said, wonder what he'd think of all this, of what I've become, what I've had to do. He'd be proud, Ernst said. Would he? I asked. I've killed men. I've watched friends die. I've made decisions that cost lives. Would he be proud of that? He'd be proud that you survived, Ernst said, that you protected your squad, that you did your duty even when it was hard, even when it cost you. That's what brothers do, Franz said. We fell silent, each lost in our own thoughts, our own memories, our own fears about tomorrow. As midnight approached, Franz spoke up. If I don't make it, he said, if tomorrow is my last day, I want you all to know. Being your brother has been the honor of my life. Franz Thurfer started. Let me finish, he said. Please, I need to say this while I can. We nodded. War is hell, Franz said. We all know that. But even in hell, there are moments of grace, moments of beauty, moments that remind you what it means to be human. He looked at each of us in turn. You've been those moments for me. Ernst and his photographs. Heinrich and his honest fear. Ludwig and his dedication. Otto and his poetry. Martin and his leadership. You've kept me human when everything around us was inhuman. He paused. So thank you for being my brothers, for accepting a literature student who had no business being a soldier, for letting me die with dignity, with purpose, with family. You're not dying yet, Heinrich said, voice thick. Soon enough, Franz said, but not alone, never alone. That's what matters. We sat together through the night, brothers in arms, waiting for dawn, waiting for the battle that would decide everything, waiting to see which of us would survive to tell the story. If any of us survived at all. The assault started at 0600 with the heaviest artillery barrage I'd experienced since the opening of the campaign. Every gun in range firing on Soviet positions around Dzerzhinsky Square. The sound was continuous rolling thunder that shook the ground, that you felt in your chest, that made your teeth ache. Buildings that were already damaged collapsed completely. The dust and smoke filled the air, turned morning into something darker than twilight. You couldn't see 10 meters. The barrage lasted 20 minutes. Felt like hours. When it lifted, the SS went in first as always. Panzer Grenadiers dismounting from their half-tracks with that characteristic swagger, that aggressive confidence that came from being the elite. We watched from 300 meters back from ruins that had been a department store. Saw them spread out in proper formation. Saw the supporting panzers follow. Saw traces from multiple machine guns converging on targets we couldn't see. And then we saw the Soviet response. They'd survived the barrage. We couldn't understand how, but they had deep basements, maybe reinforced shelters. Luck, whatever the reason. They were still fighting. Mortar rounds started falling among the SS formations. Machine gun fire from multiple buildings. The distinctive crack of anti-tank guns. A Molotov cocktail. Classic Soviet weapon. Simple and effective. Arced from a third-story window and hit a half-track squarely. The vehicle transformed instantly into rolling inferno. Men on fire. Screaming. Trying to bail out into the open where more fire waited. Some made it out. Most didn't. Their screaming didn't last long. But it lasted long enough. The SS kept pushing. Had to give them credit. They didn't break. Didn't retreat. Didn't even slow down. Just kept advancing. Taking casualties. Returning a fire. Grinding forward meter by bloody meter. But they weren't getting far. The Soviet defensive fire was too heavy. Too well coordinated. They made it to the edge of the square. Established positions in the rubble. But couldn't advance further. They were pinned. Second wave went in. More Wehrmacht infantry. More SS engineers carrying satchel charges and flamethrowers. They took casualties immediately before they'd covered 50 meters. The Soviets had every approach pre-sighted, had firing positions covering every angle, had spent weeks preparing this final defense. One entire squad caught in crossfire. Just shredded. Gone in seconds. An engineer carrying a flamethrower took a round through the fuel tanks on his back and exploded. The burning fuel engulfing him and 3 men near him, turning them all into human torches that ran screaming for seconds before collapsing. Then our turn. Third wave. We moved forward in bounds, using every scrap of cover, knowing the Soviets were watching for us, knowing every meter would be contested. The battlefield was chaos on an apocalyptic scale. Smoke everywhere from burning vehicles and buildings. The constant crack and chatter of small arms fire. The deeper boom of tank guns. The shriek of incoming mortar rounds. Bodies everywhere. Fresh dead. Wounded crying for help. Corpses from earlier assaults. The rubble was slick with blood. You couldn't not step in it. Franz went down 50 meters from our start point. One moment he was running beside me. The next he was on his back, clutching his shoulder where a round had punched through. Sniper probably, though you couldn't tell. Couldn't see where it came from. He was conscious, eyes wide with shock and pain. Mouth open, screaming, though I couldn't hear him over the general noise. Heinrich and I grabbed him, dragged him behind a pile of bricks. The wound was bad, shoulder joint shattered, bleeding heavily. But not immediately fatal if we got him help soon. But we couldn't get him help soon. Couldn't even get him back. We were committed. Assault ongoing. No stopping. I slapped a field dressing over the wound. Gave him morphine from my kit. Told him stay down. Stay quiet. We'd come back for him. He nodded. But his eyes said he knew that was a lie. Then Heinrich and I kept moving, because that's what you did. You kept moving forward, or you died where you stood. The next 100 meters took 30 minutes. Every single meter contested. Soviet defensive positions weren't surrendering. They'd fight until they were killed. Then the next position would take up the fire without pause. Textbook defense. Mutually supporting positions. Interlocking fields of fire. These weren't conscripts anymore. These were guards troops. Experienced soldiers who knew their business and were fighting for their city with everything they had. We made it to the edge of the square. Linked up with the remnants of an SS squad that had started with 12 men and was down to 5. Their squad leader was dead. The next senior man was a Rottenführer who couldn't have been more than 19, but looked 50, hollow eyes, 1,000-yard stare, blood splattered on his face from someone else's wounds. Together, we identified the key objective. Large building dominating the north side of the square, 7 stories tall, had been a hotel before the war. Ornate facade mostly blown away, but the structure still stood. The Soviets were using it as their main strong point. Machine guns and multiple windows covering different fields of fire. Snipers on the roof with clear sight lines across the entire square. What looked like a mortar team on a 5th-floor balcony. As long as they held that building, they controlled the square. As long as they controlled the square, they controlled the city center. So we had to take it Had to go into that building and dig them out floor by floor. No other option. The assault plan should have been textbook Wehrmacht doctrine. The SS had a flamethrower team. Standard two-man configuration. One carrying the fuel tanks. One operating the weapon. They'd burn out the ground floor while we provided covering fire from multiple positions. Then we'd assault through the flames while they reloaded. Simple. Effective. Standard urban combat procedure. In practice, it was immediate disaster. The flamethrower operator ran forward. Got maybe 20 meters before catching a burst from a Soviet machine gun. 7 or 8 rounds center mass. He went down hard. The fuel tanks on his back ruptured on impact. They didn't catch fire immediately. Thank whatever gods watch over soldiers. But the weapon was destroyed. Fuel spilling across the rubble in a spreading pool. His partner froze. Just stopped moving. Stared at the body lying there 20 meters away. Shock probably, or terror, or just the accumulated strain of too many days of this hell. Whatever the reason, he froze and a sniper shot took him in the head 2 seconds later. Perfect shot. Textbook marksmanship. He dropped like his strings had been cut. No flamethrower, which meant we had to do this the old-fashioned way. Grenades and small arms and sheer bloody determination. We gathered what stick grenades we had left. Maybe 20 between everyone. 20 grenades to clear a 7-story building. Laughable. Suicidal. But it was what we had, so it would have to be enough. We used them all on the ground floor. Threw them through every window. Through the blown-out main entrance. Through holes in the walls. The detonations came in rapid sequence. Each one a sharp crack, followed by the sound of shrapnel hitting masonry and flesh. Then we charged while the smoke was still settling. I went through a window on the left side, rifle up and ready. Inside was darkness and dust, and the acrid smell of explosives still hanging thick in the air. Something moved in the corner. Just a shape in the gloom. I fired twice without conscious thought. Pure reflex from 3 years of staying alive. The shape stopped moving. Others were coming in behind me now. Heinrich through the same window. 2 SS men through the main entrance. Ernst through another window on the right side. We spread out automatically. Instinctive room clearing pattern. Checking corners. Looking for targets. Calling out clear as we confirmed sectors. 4 Soviets dead from the grenades. Mangled bodies broken. 2 more wounded. 1 missing both legs below the knees. The other with his abdomen laid open. They were dealt with quickly. No prisoners. No time. No mercy. This was the final phase of the battle for the city center. Everyone knew it. The killing had gone beyond military necessity, weeks ago, had become something primal. Something that would follow us forever if we survived long enough to have a forever ground floor secure. But the building had 7 stories above us, and we could hear the Soviets up there preparing, boots running on damaged floors, furniture being dragged to create barricades, orders being shouted. They knew we were here now, knew we were coming, and they'd make us pay in blood for every floor, every room, every meter of vertical space. The first stairwell was completely blocked. Rubble. What looked incredibly like a dead horse. Though how a horse got into a hotel, I couldn't imagine and didn't want to. The blockade was solid. We couldn't get through without spending an hour clearing it. And we didn't have an hour. The second stairwell on the opposite side of the building was open. Suspiciously open. Obviously a trap, but we went up anyway because we had to. Because the mission was to take the building. And you don't take buildings by staying on the ground floor. The stairs were concrete, damaged but intact. Fresh blood on the treads. Bright red, sticky boot prints in the blood leading upward. Multiple sets. Someone wounded had come up these stairs recently. Or multiple someones. We climbed slowly. Weapons ready. Every nerve screaming that this was wrong. That something bad was waiting. First floor landing. Nothing. Continued up. Second floor landing. Nothing. The silence was worse than gunfire would have been. Silence meant they were waiting. Choosing their moment. Third floor. We were halfway up the flight when a door ahead suddenly burst open. Heinrich saw it first. Was already firing before I could react. His MP-40 roared in the enclosed stairwell. The sound physically painful. The doorway exploded with bullet impacts. Someone inside screamed. Then return of fire came. Multiple rifles and at least 1 submachine gun. The walls around us disintegrated into concrete dust and bullet fragments. Ricochets screaming off the metal railings. We couldn't go forward. Couldn't stay here. Couldn't go back without abandoning the assault. I grabbed a stick grenade from my belt. Pulled the cord. Counted to 2. Shorter fuse. Less time for them to react. And hurled it towards that doorway. Didn't wait to see where it went. Just turned and ran back down the stairs. The others following. Bouncing off walls in our haste. The grenade detonated with a sharp crack that hit like a fist. Even a flight down, the blast wave chased us down the stairs. Then silence again. That terrible combat silence where you can hear your own heartbeat, your own breathing, and wonder if the next sound will be your death. We tried the fourth floor by circling around, coming up a different approach. Same result. Immediate contact. Overwhelming fire. Forced to retreat after throwing more grenades. The Soviets weren't running, weren't surrendering. Were defending each floor like it was sacred ground. Like giving up one more meter of this building meant giving up their souls. This was taking too long. We'd been in the building maybe 20 minutes and hadn't secured past the third floor. Other buildings around the square were falling. I could hear the sounds of fighting diminishing, see smoke from new fires where resistance had been crushed. But this one building held. This one position was keeping the entire assault from completing. Then someone had an idea. One of the SS men, a Sturman who couldn't have been more than 18. We had satchel charges, big ones, 10 kilograms of TNT each, enough explosive to blow holes in reinforced concrete. Why not just blow through the floors? Set charges on the stairwell landings. Bring down the floor above. Bury the defenders, or at least stun them long enough to finish the job. It was insane. Might bring the whole building down on top of us. But it might work, and we were out of better options. We set 3 charges. Ground floor landing, second floor, third floor. Time fuses 60 seconds each. Set them all. Fell back to the ground floor. Got behind the heaviest cover we could find, which wasn't much. Just overturned furniture and rubble. Then we waited, counting in our heads. 55, 56, 57. The explosions came in sequence. Boom. Pause. Boom. Pause. Boom. Each one massive, shaking the entire structure. The sound was beyond sound. More like physical force hitting you. Dust and debris rained down. Chunks of concrete the size of cars. Somewhere above us, something large collapsed with a grinding crash that went on and on. The sound of the building eating itself. When the dust settled enough to see, and that took minutes. The air was so thick with pulverized concrete. We went back to the stairwell. It was wreckage. Huge chunks of concrete everywhere. Rebar exposed and twisted like tortured metal. Holes in the walls big enough to walk through. But the way was sort of clear. Clear enough anyway. We pushed up to the fourth floor. Found it in KE. The ceiling had partially collapsed. Soviet defenders were buried in rubble. Wounded. Stunned. Coughing blood and dust. We cleared it in minutes. Just shot anyone who moved. No hesitation. No mercy. No time for anything else. Fifth floor was similar. The blast from below had destroyed the floor structure. Sent men and equipment tumbling. Sixth floor had been evacuated. They'd pulled back to the roof. One last position. One final stand. Which left only the roof. 7 stories up. One stairwell leading to it. Narrow passage. Completely exposed. Perfect killing ground for anyone waiting at the top. We couldn't use grenades. The blast might collapse the stairwell completely, and we'd be trapped. Couldn't use another satchel charge for the same reason. So we'd have to charge direct assault straight up those stairs into whatever was waiting. Into the teeth of their final defense. Into certain casualties and possible annihilation. That young SS Sturman who'd suggested the satchel charges volunteered to go first. Said it was his idea. His responsibility. He'd lead. I told him I was the Unteroffizier. It was my job. My duty to go first. We argued maybe 30 seconds. Voices raised. Both of us knowing we were arguing over who got to die first. Then he just smiled. Actually smiled. This strange moment of human warmth in hell. Checked his MP40's magazine and went up those stairs before I could stop him. He made it 3 meters. The Soviet fire was instant and overwhelming. Multiple machine guns, rifles, everything they had concentrated on that narrow stairwell. I saw him jerk as the rounds hit. Saw him stumble, but keep going somehow. Keep climbing on pure willpower or momentum or refusal to die. Made it 2 more meters. Then his legs gave out and he fell backward, tumbling down the stairs, leaving blood smears on each step. But his sacrifice had revealed their positions, had drawn their fire, had given us intelligence, and most importantly, had given us something else to use. His body, God forgive us, but tactical necessity has no morality. We used his body as cover, used it as a shield, climbed over it while returning fire. While pushing up those final meters, the roof was small, maybe 10 meters square, open to the sky. The Soviets had a machine gun positioned behind improvised sandbags, maybe 6 men total. The gun crew, riflemen for security. They had excellent fields of fire, excellent cover, excellent position. They had every advantage except numbers. And at this point, exhausted and desperate and done with this battle, we were coming up those stairs, whether they liked it or not, whether we all died doing it or not. We poured up that stairwell, A dozen men total now. Our survivors. Some SS survivors. Maybe others I didn't even know. All of us knowing this was the final objective. That taking this roof meant taking the building, meant taking the square. So we went into that murderous fire, like automatons. Like machines that had forgotten how to do anything except advance and shoot. Men fell. Men died. But others kept coming. Kept climbing. Kept fighting. The battle lasted maybe 2 minutes of real time. Point-blank range. Absolute chaos. Everyone shooting at everyone else. Grenades going off. Someone screaming continuously in the background. Though I couldn't tell if it was Russian or German or just the universal human sound of dying. Then it was over. Sudden silence. Except for the ringing in my ears and someone's labored breathing. All the Soviet defenders were dead. 5 of our men were dead too. 3 more wounded badly enough they'd need immediate evacuation if they were going to survive. But we had the roof, which meant we had the building, which meant the square could be secured, which meant the battle for Kharkov center was effectively over. I stood on that roof, legs shaking from exhaustion, looking out over the city. Kharkov sprawled below us, broken and burning, smoke rising from hundreds of fires. The distant crump of artillery continuing somewhere to the north. Machine gun fire from streets blocks away where pockets of resistance still fought. But here in the center, it was over. The square was ours. The city center was ours. The city was ours. This was victory. This was what winning looked like. One ruined city bought with thousands of lives for strategic objectives I didn't understand. In a war that showed no signs of ever ending. Looking at those ruins, at that destruction, at the columns of smoke rising into the gray sky, I couldn't tell the difference between winning and losing anymore. Maybe there wasn't one. Maybe it was all just degrees of destruction, degrees of dying, degrees of horror that you carried with you forever after. The fighting didn't stop immediately when they declared the city center secure. Combat continued for another 2 days as final pockets of resistance were eliminated. As the Soviets conducted their withdrawal, as we cleared the remaining contested areas, but everyone knew it was over. The decisive phase had passed. The city was changing hands again. We held our position around Dzerzhinsky Square, rotating guard shifts, securing adjacent buildings, dealing with the aftermath. The aftermath was almost worse than the fighting had been. Bodies everywhere needing to be collected. German dead went to one area for identification and proper burial. Soviet dead went to mass graves. Dozens at a time. Hundreds eventually. We tried to identify the German, recover their tags, record them for notification of next of kin. The Soviets just went into holes in the ground. Some bodies had been there for days in weather that hovered around freezing. They didn't decay as fast as they would have in summer. But they decayed enough. The smell was omnipresent. Inescapable. It soaked into your clothes, your hair, your skin. You couldn't wash it off. Couldn't get away from it. It became part of the city's atmosphere. Part of the air you breathe every moment. The wounded were harder to deal with than the dead in some ways. We found them everywhere. Lying in rubble. Trapped in collapsed buildings. Hidden in cellars. Some had been there for days. Unable to move. Calling for help that hadn't come. Some were still alive when we found them. Not many, but some. The medical situation was chaos. Not enough doctors. Not enough supplies. Not enough of anything. Men died from wounds that should have been survivable. Died because there was no plasma. No antibiotics. No morphine. No way to evacuate them fast enough to hospitals that were already overwhelmed. Civilians started emerging around the 17th. Those who'd survived, who'd hidden in deep basements and bomb shelters, who'd somehow lived through weeks of artillery and street fighting. They looked like ghosts. Pale, thin, hollow-eyed, moving slowly. Like they weren't quite sure reality was real anymore. Their city was gone. Everything they'd known had been destroyed. We gave them what rations we could spare from our own inadequate supplies. Directed them toward collection points where occupation authorities would process them. Move them west. Deal with them as displaced persons. I remember one old woman in particular. She came up from her basement, looked around at the ruins of Dzerzhinsky Square, and just stood there, turning slowly. Looking at where buildings used to be. Looking at rubble that used to be streets. Looking at destruction so complete, there were no familiar landmarks left. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just turned slowly trying to find something. Anything she recognized, there was nothing left to recognize. After maybe 5 minutes of this, she just walked away slowly into the ruins, into streets that weren't streets anymore. I never saw where she went. On the 20th, we rotated out. Orders came through that we were being pulled back to reserve positions in the western suburbs for rest and refit. Rest was a joke. Refit meant getting replacements we didn't want to train. Didn't want to know because they'd just die like all the others. But orders were orders. and the machine was moving us to its next position. Of the 8 men who'd entered Kharkov with me on the 11th of March, 2 were walking out on the 20th. Me and Heinrich. Ernst had been evacuated with his side wound on the 19th. The medic said he'd survive, said the wound was clean, said he'd probably be sent to a hospital in Germany for recovery. Before they loaded him onto the truck, he gripped my hand. "Tell my daughters," he said. "Tell them their papa tried. Tell them I thought about them every single day." "I will," I said, "but you'll tell them yourself. You're going home." He smiled, weak but genuine. "I'm going home," he said. "I can't believe it. I'm actually going home." They drove him away. I never saw him again. But years later, after the war, I got a letter from Bavaria, from a farm with apple trees. Ernst had survived, had made it home, had held his daughters, and he'd named his 4th daughter, born in 1950, Martina. After me, Franz had been evacuated on the 18th with his shoulder wound. The last I saw of him, he was being carried to an aid station, face pale with blood loss and morphine, but conscious. He grabbed my hand as they carried him past. "Thank you," he said, "for being my brother." "You too," I said. "You kept us human. With your poetry, your Anna, your belief that beauty could survive even here." "Did it?" he asked. "Did any beauty survive?" I looked around at the ruins, at the bodies, at the smoke and ash and destruction. "You did?" I said. "That's enough." He smiled. Then they carried him away. I never learned if Franz survived his wound, never learned if he made it home to Anna, never learned if he ever sent that letter. But I hope he did. I hope somewhere, in some quiet place far from war. Franz Bachmann grew old reading Rilke to grandchildren who never knew what he'd survived. Peter, Karl, Otto, Ludwig, gone, buried in Kharkov's frozen earth or lost in its tunnels. Heinrich and I were all that remained, 2 of 8. We didn't talk much on the march out. What was there to say? We'd survived. Our brothers hadn't, and that knowledge sat between us like a third presence, heavier than our packs, heavier than our weapons, heavier than all the gear we carried. The spring thaw was turning everything to mud. Our boots squelched with every step. The sky was gray. The air was cold. And behind us, Kharkov burned. Still burning. Still dying. Still paying the price for being the wrong city in the wrong place at the wrong time in a war that devoured cities and men without distinction. We marched north toward Belgorod. More fighting there. Always more fighting. The machine grinding on. But for now, for these few days, we were out. We were alive. We were carrying the weight of all the dead. And that weight would never get lighter. Would never go away. Would follow us for whatever remained of our lives. The grandchildren stared at Martin with wide eyes. The kitchen in Bavaria was quiet. The afternoon light had faded to evening. Anna and Klaus sat very still. "Opa," Anna said, finally, her voice small. "That's so sad." Martin nodded. "It was sad. Kleine, war's always sad. Even when we win." "Did you see Uncle Ernst again?" Klaus asked. "After the war." "I did," Martin said, a small smile touching his lip. "He invited me to his farm in 1946. I met his daughters, all 4 of them. Little Martina was just a baby. Greta remembered me from the photograph he'd carried. She said, 'You're Papa's brother from the war.' Were you a hero, Opa?" Anna asked. Martin was quiet for a long moment, then shook his head. "No," he said. "I wasn't a hero, but I knew heroes. Otto, who stayed in a dark tunnel to buy his brother's time. Karl, who believed in goodness even in hell. Ludwig, who kept fighting even when sickness was killing him. Ernst, who survived for his daughters. Franz, who tried to keep beauty alive in a world of ugliness." He stood, moved to a drawer, pulled out an old photograph, showed it to the children. 8 young men in Wehrmacht uniforms, standing in front of a truck. "Before Kharkov, before everything, these were my brothers," he said. "Not by blood, but by something stronger, by shared suffering, by mutual sacrifice, by choosing, every day, to be human when the world wanted us to be monsters." "What happened to them?" Klaus asked. 5 died, Martin said. 3 lived. And those of us who lived, we carried the fight forward. In our memories, in our hearts, in the stories we told our children and grandchildren. He looked at the photograph for a long moment, then put it away. "War doesn't make heroes," he said. "It reveals who we already were. Some men, when everything is taken from them, when they're cold and scared and far from home, still choose courage, still choose compassion, still choose to be brothers to the men beside them. Those are the real heroes. And you? Opa, Anna asked. I tried, Martin said. I tried to be worthy of the men who died trusting me. I tried to protect my brothers. I tried to bring them home. I failed more than I succeeded. But I tried. He looked out the window, at the apple trees, at the mountains beyond, at the peaceful world his grandchildren would inherit. That's all any of us can do. He said, try to be worthy. Try to do our duty. Try to be the kind of person our fallen brothers would be proud of. The children were quiet, processing, understanding in the way children do that they'd been trusted with something important. Something true. I miss them, Martin said quietly. Every day for 30 years. I've missed them. Otto and his poetry, Karl and his songs, Ludwig and his quiet strength, Peter and Joseph and all the others whose names I barely knew. They deserve to live, deserve to go home, deserve to have families and futures. Why them and not you? Klaus asked. I don't know, Martin said. Luck, chance, the randomness of war. There's no justice in who lives and who dies. No fairness. Just chance and circumstances and tiny decisions that ripple into life or death. He sat back down, looked at his grandchildren. So I live for them, he said. I live as fully as I can. I love as deeply as I can. I try to be good and kind and useful. Because they can't, because they're gone. And the only way to honor them is to live a life they would have been proud of. We're proud of you. Opa, Anna said. Martin's eyes filled with tears. The first tears in 30 years. He pulled his grandchildren close. Thank you. Kleine, he whispered. Thank you. Outside, the sun set over Bavaria. The apple trees rustled in the evening breeze. Somewhere, in the east, in the ruins of a city that had been fought over and lost and won and lost again, the ghosts of 8 soldiers stood together, brothers in arms, forever young, forever remembered, forever carried forward by the men who survived to tell their story. And in a farmhouse kitchen in West Germany, an old soldier held his grandchildren and wept. For the dead, for the living, for the price of war, and for the brotherhood that endured beyond death, beyond time, beyond all the years that could never wash away what 9 days in hell had burned into his soul. This was Kharkov. This was war. This was what it cost. And this was what remained.